There is a specific kind of silence that lives in a house where a parent has left. Not the silence of a quiet evening. Not the comfortable silence of people who are simply in different rooms. A different kind entirely, heavier, with a particular texture that children learn to read the way other children learn to read weather. The silence that means dinner will be late again, or that the question you were going to ask had better wait, or that the space across the table is going to stay empty one more night, and then another, and eventually you stop setting that place at all. Our storyteller, we'll call her Nora, learned to read that silence when she was 7 years old. By the time she was 9, she had learned something harder, what it sounds like when it becomes permanent. Her father, we'll call him Robert, left on a Tuesday. Not dramatically. Not in a storm of shouting and slamming doors. He simply was there on Monday, and was not there on Tuesday, and the Tuesday after that, and the Tuesday after that, until Tuesday stopped being the day he might come back and became just another day of the week. That was 22 years ago. Nora is 31 now. She has built herself a real life, with a career, a home, and people who love her and show up for her in all the ways a father was supposed to but didn't. She has done the work. The therapy. The grief. The long, unglamorous process of learning to stop measuring yourself against the question of why you weren't enough for someone to stay. She thought that chapter was closed. And then, on an ordinary Thursday morning, her phone rang. A number she didn't recognize. She almost let it go to voicemail. The voice on the other end said, "Nora? It's Dad. Stay with me." Because what happened next, what Robert asked for, and what Nora said and what she did, became one of the most shared Reddit posts of the year. And the reason people shared it wasn't the outrage. It was the clarity. The extraordinary, hard-won, unshakable clarity of a woman who knew exactly who she was. Welcome back, or if this is your first time here, I am genuinely glad this video found you today. Because what we do on this channel is take the stories that real people carry, quietly, privately, for years sometimes, and we bring them into the light together. Before we begin, I want to say something directly. If you grew up with an absent parent, a father who left, a mother who disappeared, a parent who was physically present but emotionally nowhere, this story is going to feel very familiar in places. That familiar feeling is allowed. Whatever comes up while you listen, it belongs here. I also want to make you a promise. This story has an ending that is worth every minute of the journey. Not a happy ending in the way movies mean it. A true ending. The kind that comes from a person who knows exactly who they are, making a decision from that place of knowing. That is the reason this post has been saved and shared hundreds of thousands of times. Let's go back to where it all started. 22 years ago. A Tuesday. An empty chair at a dinner table that a little girl kept hoping would be filled again. Before Robert left, he was, and this is important, because it complicates things in the way that real life always complicates things, actually a pretty good father. Not extraordinary. Not the father from a movie. But present, in the casual, reliable way that children need most. He came to her school plays. He made pancakes on Sunday mornings with too much syrup and didn't care when the kitchen got messy. He had a specific laugh, loud, always a half second behind the joke, that Nora could hear from the other end of the house, and which meant to her 7-year-old self that everything was okay. She was, by her own account, a daddy's girl. Not in a spoiled way. In the way that children are when a parent makes them feel genuinely seen, when they feel like someone in the house is specifically glad they exist. When the marriage started to unravel, and it did, over a year or two that Nora was too young to track but old enough to feel, it was not just the family unit that cracked. It was that specific, irreplaceable feeling of being someone's favorite thing in a room. Nora's parents separated when she was 7. Her father moved to an apartment across the city. There were weekends at first. Not every weekend, but enough. Enough to keep the pancake tradition alive on sporadic Saturdays. Enough to make the absence feel temporary rather than permanent. She was 8 when the weekends started becoming less frequent. She was 9 when they stopped altogether. She remembers the last time she saw him before the disappearance, though she didn't know it was the last time. He had taken her to their usual diner. Red vinyl booths. Milkshakes too thick for the straw. She had told him about her school project on Saturn. He had listened. He had driven her home, hugged her in the car, and said he'd call in the week. He hadn't called in the week. Or the week after. Or the month after. Nora's mother, a woman of tremendous quiet practicality, had handled the questions as best she could. She had not spoken badly of Robert in front of Nora, which Nora recognized and appreciated deeply later, when she was old enough to understand what restraint that required. She had said simply and consistently that sometimes adults made choices that were hard to explain, and that none of those choices had anything to do with Nora being anything other than wonderful. Nora believed her mother. And she also, in the quiet of her own room on nights when she still expected the phone to ring, wondered which part of herself had been the wrong part. What she had said or done or been that had made staying seem impossible. Children do this. It is one of the most reliable and most heartbreaking things about them. They find the fault line in themselves before they ever look for it in the adult who left. Nora carried that question, not loudly, not always consciously, but like a small stone at the bottom of a pocket, for a very long time. I kept his number in my address book for 6 years after he stopped calling. A little book with a yellow cover that I kept in my desk drawer. I never called it. I just kept it there. I think I thought that as long as I had the number, the door was still open. Somewhere around 15, I threw the book away. I don't remember doing it. I just remember that it was gone one day and I felt both better and worse at the same time. The thing about growing up with an absent parent is that you eventually get to decide what to do with the space they left. Some people fill it with anger that burns clean and bright and useful. Some fill it with grief that never quite resolves. Some, and this is rarer and harder, and Nora was one of them, fill it with a very deliberate kind of construction. They build themselves, piece by piece, from the things that are actually present. The mother who stayed. The teachers who noticed. The friends who showed up. The small daily evidence that the world contains people who do not leave. Nora grew up fiercely close to her mother. The closeness that develops between two people who have been each other's entire team for a long time. Her mother worked 2 jobs for a stretch of years that Nora didn't fully understand until she was in her 20s and did the math backward, and felt for the first time the full weight of what her mother had carried completely alone. She did well in school. She went to university. She studied social work, not accidentally, she acknowledged in her Reddit post, because you do not grow up watching the damage that abandonment does and then accidentally choose a field built around preventing it. She made a genuine life. An apartment she loved. A career that mattered. A small, loyal circle of friends. She had done therapy, 3 different therapists over 10 years, and had arrived, somewhere in her late 20s, at a place she described as, not healed exactly, but organized. Like I'd sorted through all the boxes and put lids on the ones that needed lids. She was 31 years old. She had not spoken to Robert in 22 years. She had stopped dreaming about the diner with the red vinyl booths. She had, she said in her post, genuinely forgotten to be afraid of a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. Until the Thursday morning when one came. It was a Thursday morning in early spring. Nora was at home, working at her kitchen table with a coffee she had not yet finished. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Local area code. She picked up because she was expecting a call about a work matter, and this could be it. It was not it. 3 seconds of silence first. The kind of silence on a phone call that tells you the person on the other end is deciding how to begin something they have been rehearsing. Then, Nora? It's Dad. Nora told Reddit that her first reaction was not emotional. It was almost clinical, a kind of instant crystalline calm that she had learned, over years of therapy, to recognize as her nervous system's response to something it needed a moment to process before the feelings could arrive. She said, I heard the voice and I thought, oh, I know this voice. And then I thought, I haven't heard this voice in 22 years. And then I thought nothing for a second, which felt like a long time. Then she said, very evenly, I know who this is. Not warm. Not cold. Just accurate. Robert, to his credit, or perhaps because he had also been rehearsing, did not pretend that the call was casual. He said he knew it had been a long time. He said he had thought about calling many times. He said he had not been a good father and he knew that, and he was not calling to argue about it or to offer excuses. He said he was 61 years old and that things had not gone the way he had hoped they would go. Nora listened to all of this without interrupting. She had, she said later, a strange sense of watching herself listen, of being slightly outside her own body, observing the scene with a detached curiosity of someone who had imagined this call so many times in childhood that the real version felt, paradoxically, slightly unreal. She waited until Robert had finished. Then she asked, quietly and without accusation, "What is it you're calling for, Robert?" The use of his first name. Not Dad. Not an angry title. Just his name plainly, the way you might use it for a person you do not know well. There was a pause. Then Robert said that he was in some financial difficulty. That his retirement savings had not accumulated the way he had planned. That he had some medical expenses that had come up unexpectedly. That he knew he had no right to ask. He said this. He said he knew he had no right, but he was wondering if Nora might be in a position to help him in some way. Even a small amount. Just to get through the immediate pressure. He had been on the phone for approximately 4 minutes and 30 seconds. 22 years of silence, and he had used 4 minutes and 30 seconds to arrive at a request for money. He had left her at 9. He had come back at 61. He had taken 4 minutes to reach the part where he needed something from her. Nora did not respond immediately. She let the silence sit for a moment, not as a performance, but because she genuinely needed a moment to locate what she actually felt. What she felt, she said, was not rage. She had expected rage if this call ever came. What she found instead was something quieter and more complete. A kind of settled, almost peaceful certainty. Like a question she had been carrying for 22 years had just answered itself. She said, "I appreciate you calling, Robert. I'm going to need a day to think about what you've said. I'll call you back tomorrow." She ended the call. She put the phone face down on the table. She looked at her coffee, which had gone cold. She picked it up anyway and finished it. Then she called her mother. Nora's mother picked up on the second ring, the way she always did, because she was the kind of person whose phone was never face down on a table when her daughter might need her. Nora told her what had happened. All of it. The voice. The rehearsed opening. The 4 minutes. The request. Her mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that Nora quoted in full in her Reddit post, because she said it was the most important thing anyone said to her in the entire experience. "Baby. Whatever you decide, I need you to decide it for yourself. Not for me, not for him, not for what you think you should feel. What do you want to do?" Nora sat with that question for the rest of the day. She did not call her therapist, though she thought about it. She did not call her friends, though she knew any one of them would have answered. She wanted this particular process to be her own, uninfluenced, unmediated, entirely internal. She made dinner. She ate it alone, which she often did and usually enjoyed. She washed the dishes. She sat on her couch with the television off. She thought about Robert, not about what he had done to her, but about who he was. A 61-year-old man who had made choices 22 years ago that had set the course of everything since. Who had called not because he had finally found the courage to face what he'd done, but because the consequences of other choices had caught up to him and he needed something. She thought about the address book with the yellow cover. About the 7-year-old who had kept a phone number for 6 years without ever dialing it. About everything the child had done with the space that should have been filled with a father. The work, the therapy, the building, the organizing of boxes. And she felt something she had not expected to feel. She felt grateful. Not to Robert. Not for what he'd done or failed to do. Grateful to herself. To the version of herself that had done all the work required to arrive at this moment without being destroyed by it. To the 31-year-old woman who could receive that phone call, say "I'll call you tomorrow," finish a cold cup of coffee, and spend an evening thinking clearly about what she actually wanted. By morning, she knew her answer. Not what she was supposed to feel. Not what would make anyone else comfortable. What she actually wanted. "I need you to stay right here." Because the call Nora made the next morning, and exactly what she said, and the response she wrote to Reddit after it was done, is the part of this story that broke the comment section open. People wrote paragraphs. People cried. People said it was the thing they had needed to hear for 20 years and hadn't known how to say until they read Nora say it first. Here is what happened. The next morning, Nora called Robert back. He picked up on the first ring, which told her he had been waiting. She said, "I've thought about what you said. I want to say some things, and I'd like you to hear them without interrupting. Can you do that?" Robert said yes. And Nora spoke. Calmly, clearly, without a raised voice, without cruelty, without the performance of either forgiveness or fury. She had not written anything down. She said it came out already organized, the way things do when you've been thinking about them, even without knowing it, for most of your life. "I want you to know that I don't carry hatred for you. I spent some years carrying it and it was heavy and it didn't do anything useful, so I put it down. What I carry instead is just the truth of what happened, which is that you were my father and you left, and I was 9 years old, and I needed you for a lot of years after that in ways you weren't there for. I needed you when I didn't make the school team and no one explained to me that it was okay to fail at things. I needed you at my graduation, which you didn't come to, because I don't think you knew it was happening. I needed you when I was 23 and going through something hard that I won't describe to you because you haven't earned that story yet. I needed you in 100 small ways that I have since learned to meet myself, which I am proud of, and which I would not have been able to do if I had kept waiting for you to show up. I am not going to give you money. Not because I want to punish you, I genuinely don't, but because giving you money would require me to participate in a version of our relationship that has never actually existed. You are not my father in any functional sense. You are a man I am biologically connected to who made a choice 22 years ago that I have spent my entire adult life processing and recovering from. I don't owe that man money. I don't owe him anything. What I will tell you is this: if you ever want to have a real conversation, not about what you need, but about what happened and what you chose and what that cost, I am open to that. I'm not promising anything beyond being willing to have it. But if you call me again about money, I won't pick up. I'm not saying this to be cruel. I'm saying it because it's true and because I think you deserve to have someone tell you the truth. There was a silence on the other end of the call. Then Robert said, very quietly, "I understand." And that was the end of the conversation. Nora put the phone down. She stood in her kitchen for a moment. Then she made breakfast, eggs, toast, coffee, and ate it at the table where, the day before, she had received the most significant phone call of her adult life. She ate slowly. She tasted her food. She felt, she said, like someone who had just put down something extremely heavy that she had been carrying for so long she'd forgotten it had a weight. She was not happy exactly. She was not sad. She was something harder to name. Clear. Nora posted on Reddit that afternoon. She posted in a community for adult children of absent parents, a place she had been a quiet, mostly lurking member of for several years, finding comfort in the recognition of shared experience without always needing to add her own story to it. Today she had a story worth adding. She wrote it in one sitting without editing, in the way that things come out when they are finally ready to be said. It was long. People read it anyway. It got 47,000 upvotes in the first 24 hours. The comment section, which Reddit comment sections are not always known for being, was full of people writing the most honest things they had ever written about their own fathers and mothers and empty chairs and address books with yellow covers. But it was one specific paragraph near the end of Nora's post that got screenshotted and shared and saved by people who had never been on Reddit in their lives. The paragraph that traveled far outside the community it was written for, and into the inboxes and text threads and social media feeds of hundreds of thousands of people who recognized something in it that they hadn't had language for before. This is what she wrote. I spent a lot of years waiting to feel ready to be in contact with my father. Waiting until I was healed enough, or strong enough, or until the anger had fully passed. But I think I had the wrong frame. I wasn't waiting to be ready. I was waiting to be safe. To become someone who could receive whatever version of him showed up without it destroying something I had worked hard to build. What I realized after the call yesterday is that I am that person now. Not because the wound is gone. It isn't. And I don't think it ever fully will be. But because the wound is mine. It is part of me and I know where it is and I can touch it without falling. That took a long time and a lot of help and I do not take it for granted for a single second. What I want to say to anyone who is in an earlier part of this, who still has a yellow address book in a desk drawer, figuratively or literally, is this: the goal is not to stop missing what you deserved. The goal is to build a life so full of real things that the missing becomes one note in a larger piece of music, rather than the only sound in the room. My father called wanting money. He did not get it. What he got, I hope, was the truth. That is all I had to give him. It turns out that was enough for me. I want to sit with one sentence from Nora's post, just one, because I think it contains more than it appears to on the surface. The goal is not to stop missing what you deserved. The goal is to build a life so full of real things that the missing becomes one note in a larger piece of music, rather than the only sound in the room. This sentence traveled because it told the truth about something that the standard narrative around absent parents almost never tells. The standard narrative says, forgive or don't forgive. Move on or don't move on. Have a relationship with them or cut them off. It presents these as clean binary choices that lead to clean binary outcomes. What Nora is describing is something more honest and more difficult, that the wound does not close. That you do not arrive at a destination called healed, where the loss no longer exists. That grief for what you deserved but never had is not a problem to be solved, but a permanent feature of a landscape that you learn, with time and work, to live in fully and even beautifully. And that what you build around the wound matters enormously. The life that Nora constructed, the career, the apartment, the friends, the 3 therapists, the mother she called on the second ring, that life was not a compensation for what Robert didn't give her. It was the evidence that she had found other sources of what she needed. That the world did, in fact, contain what a father was supposed to provide. She had just had to find it in different places and different forms. Robert called wanting something from a transaction, money in exchange for a biological connection he had abandoned 22 years prior. What Nora gave him instead was the most genuinely paternal thing she could offer, an honest account of the truth, delivered without cruelty, with the door left slightly open if he ever wanted to walk through it differently. She did not need him to be her father anymore. She had built herself in the space where he should have been. And she had built something real. The address book with the yellow cover has been gone for 16 years. The life that replaced it is full, and present, and entirely hers. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you. Not for the view. For staying. For giving this story the time and attention it deserved. I want to ask you something real. Have you ever received a call, or a message, from someone who left? And if you have, what did you say? Or what do you wish you had said? Share it in the comments if you're willing. This is one of the safest comment sections on this platform, and I mean that. Your story matters here. And if part of Nora's words landed somewhere true for you, if that sentence about the music and the missing said something you've been trying to say for a long time, I would love to know. Subscribe if this video felt like something you needed. Share it with one person who is somewhere in the middle of their own version of this story. And come back next week, because we have more stories just like this one. Stories about the families we were given and the lives we build anyway. I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves this week. You've earned it. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you. Not for the view. For staying. For giving this story the time and attention it deserved. I want to ask you something real. Have you ever received a call, or a message, from someone who left? And if you have, what did you say? Or what do you wish you had said? Share it in the comments if you're willing. This is one of the safest comment sections on this platform, and I mean that. Your story matters here. And if part of Nora's words landed somewhere true for you, if that sentence about the music and the missing said something you've been trying to say for a long time, I would love to know. Subscribe if this video felt like something you needed. Share it with one person who is somewhere in the middle of their own version of this story. And come back next week, because we have more stories just like this one. Stories about the families we were given and the lives we build anyway. I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves this week. You've earned it.